Good day, everyone. This is your teacher, Miss Mars. And on today's video lecture, we will finally open a new unit because we already finished our midterm. And that means, class, we are already in the middle of the semester. So we are very close towards the end of our first semester for this academic year 2021 to 2022. So we have to keep going, and I'm very glad that this video lecture we will be opening a new unit, and that is Unit 3, Adapting Materials. So I am not gonna, prolong this introduction. So without further ado, let's go to the real business, and that is take a look at Unit 3. So we have here our PowerPoint presentation now for Unit 3, and this is still, of course, under our class language learning materials development. And Unit 3, as I mentioned earlier, it's all about adapting materials. So there are 3 lessons that is under Unit 3. But before we proceed to the different lessons, let us take a look at first the objectives for this unit, class, or the desired learning outcomes that you guys should possess right after our lecture on Unit 3. So these are the following after our Unit 3. You would be able to outline the process of materials adaptation from different points of view. The second is you would be able to examine range of technology-based materials, so take note of this one, and tools available that you class can use for your language classes. Okay, so we are going to look into, especially now, our platform now and the delivery of instruction is mostly online. So we are going to take a look at into technology-based materials, okay, that you can utilize in your online classes, since next academic year you will become student teachers and you should be equipped with these applications, or what are these things that you can utilize in order to assist you to teach your learners. And then the third one is you would be able to apply the criteria in selecting and evaluating language learning materials. Because when we adapt materials, class, we need to have basis. Why should we select this? Okay, and so that's why we need to know how to select and evaluate a specific language learning material for the purpose of adaptation. So we have here our unit introduction. So L2, or the second language, materials development, definitely has played a significant role as an academic discipline for quite a number of years already. And it's not only offered here, class, in the Philippines, but of course it's offered across the globe, because as pre-service teachers, you should really know you should be equipped with the principles or the theories on how you could create an ideal, or how you could create these materials that you would utilize in your area of work, which is, in the academia. Even if the L2 materials development has already been offered or considered as an academic discipline, there still seems to be a gap between the theoretical findings that we can find in the second language acquisition research or theories, and the practice in many course books and published materials. So it's just like this. There are so many research out there about second language acquisition. Okay, if you're going to type SLA as your keyword on Google Scholar or any journal, especially if the journal focuses on the language teaching, English language teaching. If you type SLA, then there are so many, okay, multitude of research studies that would come out. However, in terms of practice, class, because of course there are this result of the research, but in terms of practice, looking into the course books that we have now or that we are using and the published material according to our main reference of this book, there seems to be a gap still between the SLA research and the course books and published materials. So that means a mismatch between some of the pedagogic procedures, or we say pedagogic, that really talks about or associated with the profession of teaching, the pedagogic procedures of current textbooks, and what second language acquisition researchers have discovered about the process of learning a second or foreign language. So there are two people important here: the developers of course books or materials, and at the same time, those people who are doing research studies or publishing research studies and discover the process or the change in terms of the process of learning regarding second or foreign language. But if we are going to take a look at now the produced textbooks, it does not actually match with those demanded by the results of research. Okay, so take note, many examples of materials produced for language teaching and learning purposes seem to still follow a very similar format sa una. Okay, those that, were already published, the course books that we have before. If we are going to take a look at with the course book now, according to this reference of ours, definitely this is the book of Tomlinson. No? According to the book, it definitely does not match, okay? Because there should be changes. We have already a lot of published research studies in terms of learning a second or foreign language. But how come, okay? How come we still quite use the same format as the ones being used before? So that is the million-dollar question. To specify further, in the conventional format, the activities are mostly based on language manipulation, okay? And when do we say that it's based on language manipulation? When we see a lot of drills, comprehension tests, substitution tables. That's according, okay, to our reference. And the topics are generally trivial and very often not even relevant to the learner's needs and interest, because as what I told you, there has been a mismatch of the pedagogic course books and at the same time the results of the second language research studies that are already published. Okay, of course, class, these researchers who are conducting research studies, they are looking into now what are the problems, okay? And these are the problems. What are the demands? What are the needs, the interests now of the learners? Since our centuries now have changed, everything changes now. So why there is still a mismatch? Because if we are going to study the course books, still they focus on language manipulation and very often not even relevant to the needs and interest of the learners. So the objectives, according to Tomlinson, according to the book of Tomlinson, the objectives are usually based on the main format. And what is this main format? The main format, class, it's known the PPP. There are 3 P, triple P. The first P, it's the presentation. The second P, it's the practice. And the third P is the production. So the PPP approach, which seems to be still overwhelmingly present in so many textbooks for language teaching, and this has very little basis in research. So the PPP approach is, of course, presentation. You focus on your content or the context you discuss and all that, the theories and stuff. And after, you provide practice for the students, and later on for the practice, of course, you are building their accuracy. For the production, now you are building their fluency, because here they are going to practice. Probably you would let them read what you can, let them do so they can imitate and follow. So that is the PPP, or the presentation, practice, production approach. But according to our reference, it is overwhelmingly still present in so many textbooks, but it definitely has no basis or very limited base in terms of the research. So according to our reference, what really is being emphasized here is that why should we not utilize the results of the research studies being published? Why should we, disregard them when in fact they are based on facts? Okay, they are based on the the real scenario or the real thing that is going on. And to solve the problem of our learners now is to take a look at now results of research. That is why there are a lot of research studies published for teachers to refer to. So as I said, when we say presentation, practice, production, approach, we take a look at presentation as looking into the content or the context, and practice, it's in the middle, meaning you are building the accuracy of the learners here. And the third one, which is production, is you are now enhancing or honing the fluency of the learners. Now, what does PPP stand for? So PPP class, it is actually, yes, a successful teaching method. And in fact, it's widely used throughout the world by so many English as foreign language or English as second language teachers. Again, I am going to give you a difference when we say EFL and ESL. When we say EFL class, our students here are those students who consider English as their foreign language. So kinsa maning mga estudyante nga nag-consider og foreign language ang English. For example, we have Koreans, we have Japanese, Chinese. Okay, they consider English as their foreign language, or those people who belong in the expanding circle of Braj Katrus, three circles of English. However, when we say ESL or English as second language, the learners who belong to ESL are those learners who actually belong to the outer circle of Braj Katrus, three circles of English. So that means you consider or they consider English as their second language. Example is the Philippines. No, we consider English as our second language. We speak English well, and we can understand English all throughout. If it is used in media, television, newspaper, there is no problem in terms of understanding a certain text if it is being, presented in English. So we have no problem at all. Most of us understand that because English is our second language. But when we say, that's why class, kung yung tag ESL, kanang bitong mga ESL schools that we have here in the Philippines, but then who are these students they cater? The students we cater in the ESL schools that we have in the Philippines are those students who actually consider English as the foreign language. Okay, of course, among estudyante na to sa ESL, dili ba yung mga Pinoy, right? So it should supposedly be, if we are going to stick with the terminologies, but it's supposed to be not ESL school but EFL schools, because our learners in ESL schools that are actually operating in the Philippines are learners coming from different countries who consider English as their foreign language. Okay? Yalahi po tong mga native speakers, because the native speakers of English class, they are the ones who belong in the inner circle if we are going to consider Braj Katrus three circles of English. So, of course, there is no doubt, native speaker, native speaker, that is their language, diba? So, there is no doubt they really speak English very well in terms of accent. That's their, we could not argue with them on that. Their accent, the way they, pronounce the words and such. But the thing is, since we already have the world Englishes, that means we have to respect the variety of English that is present in other countries. So, for example, Philippines, that means we have to respect the variety of English that is present in a certain country. For example, class, in the Philippines, we have Philippine English. No, we not all of us really speak English like a native speaker, but how we wish we speak English the near native, diba? That's our goal actually. But come on, let us all understand we have the interference of our L1. Okay, that's why we have to give ourselves generosity in terms of the way we speak in English. But if you really wish to be good in English like the native speaker, it's really a very good goal as well. So you know what to do. There are so many ways for you to improve. And one of the best ways for us to improve is by exposing ourselves in the native English or in a speaking community where the speakers that we are interacting with are they are probably native speakers of the language. Okay, so let's say there is no opportunity for us to interact with the native speakers, then you could watch Hollywood films, diba? Mga films that use English as the language. So moving on, every PPP lesson has a language aim, which students should fulfill by the end of it. And the PPP class can be applied to teach grammar items, functions, vocabulary, and even pronunciation. So we have here a PPP, presentation, practice, production. So for the presentation, this is phase one. The teacher here introduces a situation and presents the target language in context. So you are going to present the English here, because English is our target language, in a specific context. Specific context meaning we consider a certain community, or we make use of English to for example, we use it in a specific area. Okay, like in the context of the Philippines, because students can relate, because our students are Filipinos. It's not okay man class nga. We are going to definitely talk about, and like all the time you talk about US, all the time you talk about England, okay, or those native, countries that speak English as its native language. We cannot talk about those countries all the time. Why? Because if we talk about that all the time, our learners wouldn't be able to relate, and they would dislike learning that language because it's something that they feel like not even their own. Okay, so that is why the teacher introduces a situation and presents a target language in their context. So students here practice the target language or L2 items using accurate reproduction techniques. That is now the practice. So practice, you are honing. Okay, you are building now the accuracy of the learners. And production, students use here the target language and make sentences of their own. So now this is application. That's why we call it production. And most of the time, plus the PPP approach is what is being followed by many course book writers. Okay, so, or by many material developers. So we shall go on. The topics seem to reoccur, particularly in many low-level books. Okay, so in low-level books, topics are repeated and repeated. And where the lower the level, the less controversial and provocative the content seems to be. Okay, particularly for materials published for beginners, mauni siya ang very common. We really see topics like giving introductions about ourselves, okay, introducing oneself, numbers, okay, food and drinks, time expressions, expressions of quantity or shopping, the future, and transportation, and the list goes on and on. And this is very common. So a number of potential limitations can be identified with these types of language teaching materials. Okay, they tend to undermine and demotivate learners, okay? Because they are rather trivial. These are now the drawbacks, no, of following the very conventional format. Katong giingon ako ganiha, very conventional, using the PPP approach, where of course topics would be listed this way, especially for low-level books, no? Introductions, numbers, food and drinks, time expressions, expressions of quantity or shopping, the future, transportation, and the list goes on. So what are now the limitations? So the limitation, because mauman to ang list of topics class that we can find usually in low-level books, they tend to undermine and demotivate the learners because it is very structured. Okay, they are rather trivial. Okay, they are not new or innovative. They tend to give a very stereotypical image of the target language. Ang target language, this is how it should be. Okay, very stereotypical. Okay, more about it's already conditioned in our brain that if we are going to learn a target language, it should be that we have to start and follow those things. They do not take into consideration their main users, more specifically learners and teachers. Okay, so the main users are the learners. what are the needs of the learners? And how about the teachers? Are the teachers really very good in this language and the likes? So that is one of the limitations if we are going to follow that conventional format. Okay? And let's try to take a look at what does it imply? Unsa man gigbuot ipasabot niya ana sa ato a class. So what does it imply? It is in this context that adapting courses becomes vital as it can involve changing activities, topics, and therefore objectives. So the implication of this, because of the mismatch and all that, kinahanglan kita teachers when we adapt, okay, materials or when we adapt courses, we have to be very vigilant or we have to be knowledgeable about it because it may appear or there may be a need for us to change activities, okay, to change the topics and even the objectives because the teachers like I, okay, and you class, we are the ones who know our learners so well. Okay, compared to the ones creating the course books. Uy, malay ba nila sa atong mga learners, di ba? They don't know where our learners come from because the course book developers, they kind of really create a very generic, okay, generic course book. So that is why we should know how to adapt materials. So in an attempt to make the materials more relevant and useful for their users, the conventional approach to a materials adaptation generally relates to a number of changes to the materials. Okay, so how should we do it? We may do the process of deleting, not I delete sa topics because you might, oh, this topic really is not needed at all with the learners that I have. You can also reorder or even add. So reorder, that means you believe that your learners should know this one first, then the other one. So you can reorder. And at the same time, you can add. So that's where our academic freedom comes in as teachers. Diba? Kita teachers, we have the academic freedom. We are given the freedom how to do things because we are the ones who really know our learners so well. Okay? The best person who knows his or her learners is the teacher. Then what is adapting materials? Adapting materials class, it is inevitable process. We can never do away with adapting materials. We always need to adapt materials. It is always even carried out as part of classroom practice. So it is one of our classroom practices. Simple fact of using a piece of teaching or learning materials inevitably means you adapt. For example, you have a specific topic in grammar. What you want to do is you want to use this certain piece of literature because you believe that it's gonna cater to the needs of your learners, and that is already you're adapting. Okay, that is already adapting materials. So in the practice of language teaching, this has been accepted for quite a long time now. So that's all about for our Unit 3 introduction. Now let's go to Lesson 1. So our focus on this video lecture class will be Lesson 1, that is teacher-centered and learner-centered approach to adaptation. So you know already when we say teacher-centered, well, I am the teacher. Dapat kung unsa ang ako ang gusto para sa mga estudyante maoy mahitabo. But if you're a learner-centered teacher, you always consider your learners. Unsa man ang imuhang ganahan? Or what is it that I notice my learner really has a problem with this. I notice my students are very weak in this area. So you don't go on that unless you can make sure that your learner really is already good of that certain topic. Okay, so process of materials adaptation, now we consider the different points of view. So the different points of view is the point of view of a teacher-centered material, developer, or the teacher-centered mindset. And the second is the learner-centered mindset. So for the teacher-centered, Materials adaptation. Okay, when we adapt materials, so for example, ako teacher-centered kay ko, and when I adapt materials class, I would just consider myself, it would only be largely based on my intuition and experience. Like for me, this is really what they need. So I don't care. This is what I believe. I'm the teacher. I should really, decide on this one. That is teacher-centeredness. But when we say learner-centered point of view, you stress the importance of the learner and their role in the language classroom. So, well, if I am going to choose or adapt this certain material, would it be, is it really like within the interest of my students? Okay, that is something that we have to consider. And then another, learners for the teacher-centered, learners are traditionally left with a rather passive role. So the learner's role here is very passive, okay? And the learner-centered, many areas of research have extensively explored and described the advantages of learner involvement in program design, the methodology, material selection, and the adaptation, okay? Program design, methodology, material selection, and adaptation. And according to Clark in the year 1989, if you have the learner-centered point of view, you provide a typical example of a learner-centered approach to adaptation through this. You would acknowledge the importance of your learner of the involvement of your learners in the adaptation process. For example, class, okay, so you would acknowledge the importance of learner involvement in the adaptation process. And you would distinguish what he calls a negotiated syllabus from an externally imposed syllabus. So if I may recall, especially during the times when there was still face-to-face classes and interaction is still easier and within our grip, okay? Unlike now, it's very difficult. But during face-to-face class, I would really ask my students, oh, look at the syllabus that I created. What do you think? Are there lessons you wanted me to add, or maybe lessons you wanted to take? And we will no longer discuss, because maybe would say that, oh, there's really nothing to discuss about this anymore because you have mastered it already in your previous years. But eventually students will just say, okay, miss, whatever is in the syllabus, you just follow, we will follow that. Okay, but don't blame me because I ask you to add, or maybe there are things you wanted to delete, or what is it that you want to revise in our syllabus. So next, let's try to take a look at what is negotiated syllabus then and the externally imposed syllabus. When we say negotiated syllabus, from the word negotiated, so meaning there is an internal agreement, or it is generated or it is produced with the participation of the teacher and the student. So the students are being consulted, and also they were heard, like their interest and what is it that they really like doing. The externally imposed syllabus is, okay, this is the syllabus that you have to follow because this is given from the Department of Education, or this is required by CHED, this is required by this and that, or even the academics head, the school. This is already the format of the school. This is what we have to follow then. Okay, so it's externally imposed syllabus. With that, there is nothing that we can do but just follow. We could no longer ask the students' participation. Okay, so if we write about a learner's more active role in the adaptation process and his or her negotiation with a teacher, we are actually assuming here that the syllabus is a product of cooperation between the teacher and the learners. And I believe that is the best syllabus. However, in general case, actually, that is not what is being practiced. No, the teacher's input tends to become the dominant one, because also when, like my experience, so I ask my students, but then they would also like say, okay, miss, we'll just follow, what the syllabus that you created, and that's it. Because I think some students would also feel like it's such a hassle to really partake in something like that. But how we wish, or this kind of brainstorming or the negotiated ones are really best. Okay, so, and since the dominant one is a teacher here in the externally imposed or the teacher centered view, so it is accepted by the learners as the right one and the one to follow, whereas the learners' ideas on adapting materials are very often perceived to be wrong if different from those of the teacher. So, well, the best thing really is for teachers to be able to really consider the needs of his or her students. And this is our first task. So you're going to create an outline. I already presented earlier the different points of view in terms of the teacher centered and then the learner centered. So for your task, which I will add this on the Google Classroom, you're going to create an outline on the process of materials evaluation, considering the different views, teacher centered and learner centered. And this is the format that you are going to follow. It's the traditional outline format. And also, class, please read Adaptation as critical awareness development on page 52 to 56. You can find it in the PDF book that I shared with you on our Google Classroom. Okay, so that's it for lesson 1. And this is also the end for this video lecture. We are going to end in lesson 1. So that means next video lecture we'll talk about lesson 2 and lesson 3, because unit 3 class only has 3 lessons. So we already finished lesson 1. So next time will be lesson 2 to lesson 3. So, okay. I hope, class, you learned a thing or two from our discussion today. And I also hope that everything is clear in terms of the teacher-centered and the learner-centered. At the same time, the introduction of adapting materials. Why do we have really to include adapting materials in our discussion? So I'm glad to talk with you this today, and I hope once again, you learn a thing or two. Be careful, be safe, and God bless us all. So I will see you next time for lesson 3 and lesson 4. Bye, everyone.